Hey guys. Welcome to Calm History. Tonight we're slipping back into the smoky stillness of feudal Japan, where steel gleamed, silk rustled, and a man's outfit could determine whether he met the day or met his doom. You're standing on a wooden veranda just before sunrise. The floorboards are cool beneath your feet. In the near distance, mist curls around pine trees, and the quiet is interrupted only by the distant hiss of a tea kettle. Inside, a figure sits perfectly still in seiza, kneeling posture, breathing deeply, eyes half-lidded. His name doesn't matter. You might not even hear it before the end of the day. Hey, if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now find a cozy spot. Take a slow, deep breath, and let your body sink into comfort as we journey back in time together. Congratulations. Because here's the thing, being a samurai wasn't just about wielding a sword. It was about reading the room, through the color of sleeves, the stiffness of a collar, the sound your fabric made when you turned your head. Your outfit wasn't just what you wore. It was what you were. And yes, you had one set of clothes for slicing people and another for dozing off in a sunbeam. Because life was that precarious. And that absurd. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink, and we begin. You've just woken up in a tatami-lined room. The air smells faintly of incense and cedar. Your armor is nowhere nearby. You're in soft cotton robes, loose, pale, easy to move in. They're not for fighting. They're for being alive. You scratch behind your ear and wonder if anyone's waiting outside to challenge you to a duel before breakfast. Probably not. But you never really know. See, back in the Edo period, even during peaceful stretches, a samurai had to be in a constant state of mental readiness. But physical readiness? That depended heavily on what you were wearing. The reality was, you couldn't duel in a sleeping robe without getting your sleeve tangled around your own sword. And you couldn't nap in full armor unless you wanted to wake up with a rib bruise and a pinched nerve. So you had two options, a practical, mobile, dueling outfit, tailored, layered, hardened, and ceremonial in all the worst ways, and a soft, defenseless sleeping outfit that whispered, "Please don't murder me while I'm dreaming." One for public honor. One for private surrender. And the line between them wasn't just about comfort. It was about class, danger, and social optics. If someone found you asleep in the wrong robe, they might assume you were sick. Or drunk. Or worse, dishonorable. And if you weren't asleep but were wearing your nap robe in public? That was its own kind of social harakiri. You tighten your sleeping yukata just a little. The morning air cuts sharper than you expected. Outside, servants are whispering. One of them steps close and bows. "Shall I bring your dueling hakama?" they ask. And you sigh, because honestly, you were hoping for a nap today. Historians still argue whether samurai strictly adhered to these wardrobe codes every day, or whether that's just a romanticized fiction layered into modern retellings. But one thing's certain, they absolutely had different outfits for different states of readiness. It wasn't just about hygiene or comfort, it was about sending signals. To enemies. To allies. To yourself. And the stakes were weirdly high. One documented case tells of a young samurai who was mocked by a rival for wearing loose lounging robes during a poetry recital. No duel was fought. But the shame? Lifelong. And the poet? He stopped composing altogether. Tragic, yes, but also deeply on brand for a class obsessed with appearance, discipline, and internalized melodrama. Which brings us to another truth, you probably wouldn't survive this lifestyle. Between the constant threat of ambush, the emotional weight of fashion faux pas, and the absurdity of needing a second outfit just to digest lunch, well, you'd be better off in the modern world, where your worst morning disaster is wearing mismatched socks to Zoom. Still, there's something oddly poetic about it. To know that even in a life defined by violence, men cared about what kind of robe they slept in. That softness mattered. That comfort meant something. And if you think the sleeping outfit is strange, just wait till we get to the rain cloak superstition. But first, you rise, stretch, and wonder whether today is a dueling day, or a nap day. Or, if you're very unlucky, both. Section 2. You trudge barefoot across the tatami mats, each footfall a whisper in the morning hush. The world is still gray with dawn. Through the paper shoji doors, a sliver of sun glints off the dew. You haven't had tea yet. You haven't seen your sword. But already, your body is slipping into its ritual. First, a slow bow toward the alcove where a single flower rests in a vase. Because even in a world of blades, there's time for chrysanthemums. Then comes the stretch. You kneel. You bow. You rise, arms raised like you're welcoming the sky. The sleeves of your sleeping yukata fall back, baring your forearms to the cool air. You roll your shoulders, test the flexibility in your back. No stiffness. That's good. If today's the day someone challenges you, you'll at least be limber. That's the thing about being a samurai. Every morning is a question you can't answer yet. Will I drink tea, or bleed on someone's porch? And believe it or not, the tea matters. Before anything else, before you even pick up your sword, you sit before a lacquered tray. A tiny ceramic cup steams gently. You wrap both hands around it. The warmth seeps into your fingers. The tea is bitter. Green. Ground matcha whipped to a froth. It tastes like the earth, like moss and bark and rain-soaked roots. It's not meant to be pleasant. It's meant to wake you. Sharpen you. That sharpness matters too. Samurai culture was filled with rituals that blurred the lines between practicality and poetry. Stretching wasn't just physical, it was philosophical. Every movement had meaning. The way you sat, the angle of your arms, the bend of your wrist, it all spoke volumes about your discipline, your family, your state of mind. Even the way you sipped tea could signal whether you were at peace, or ready to draw steel. Historians still argue whether these rituals were universal across all samurai ranks or primarily practiced by elite retainers close to courtly life. But diaries from the Sengoku and Edo periods suggest these habits were far more than performative. They were internal scaffolding. The first armor you put on each day wasn't metal, it was routine. You finished the tea in 2 sips. Set the cup down. And now, finally, comes the moment your hand reaches for the cloth bundle in the corner. It's your dueling outfit. Not armor, not yet. Just the foundation. The underkimono is stiff, plain, navy blue. It smells faintly of camphor and old wood smoke. Over that goes the hakama, those wide-legged pleated trousers that swish like water when you walk. And then, the kosode, short-sleeved and tied snugly, so it doesn't flap during a quick draw. You cinch it tight. Breathe in. Suddenly you feel different. Like the air around you has become denser. Like the room is waiting for something. Because now you're dressed to kill. Or at least, to look like you could. And that's no small thing. One of the quirkiest truths about samurai attire? The visual intimidation factor. According to fringe theories, and at least one slightly dramatic scroll, some samurai deliberately tailored their dueling outfits to exaggerate their size, shoulder padding, wider belts, higher collars, to look just a bit more menacing in the fog of dawn. A walking optical illusion, if you will. Did it work? Hard to say. But it definitely made for cooler portrait scrolls. You glance down at your sleeves. Tight enough to not catch on the hilt, loose enough to flick back when you bow. Perfect. Outside, someone is calling your name. Not yelling, just politely summoning. There's a formality to even that. You walk out onto the veranda, fully dressed for whatever the day demands. Your sleeping robe lies folded on the mat behind you, a ghost of the softness you've left behind. And in your gut, something settles. There's peace in preparedness. In being dressed for anything. Even death. You take the wooden steps down from the veranda, each one groaning softly beneath your heels. The air is damp. The morning fog curls around the hem of your hakama like a cat unsure if it should trust you. Birds chirp hesitantly from the canopy, sparrows, mostly, with the occasional raven letting everyone know he's the real boss of the forest. Ahead, your armor awaits. Laid out on a low bench beneath a cedar overhang, it glistens faintly. Lacquered plates of lamellar armor, individual scales laced together with silk cords dyed in clan colors, sitting like a patient beetle, waiting to be strapped onto a human host. And it's quiet. So very quiet. You kneel beside it, almost reverently, because you know how noisy it will be. Samurai armor doesn't whisper. It doesn't glide silently into action. No, when you wear it, it announces you. You become a walking wind chime of intent. Every step a soft clatter. Every shift of your shoulders, a squeak of cord or a rasp of hardened lacquer brushing silk. In battle, it sounds like courage. In hiding? It sounds like, you're definitely not sneaking up on anyone. This is why some samurai trained barefoot, to minimize sound when the rest of their outfit was basically a percussion section. And that creak? That wasn't a flaw. That was the point. Your hand moves to the do, the chest plate. It's shaped to curve just enough to deflect a blade, but wide enough to give you room to breathe. You strap it on slowly, feeling the slight weight shift your posture. The shoulder guards come next. Then the kote, armored sleeves that make you feel a bit like a falconer preparing to wrangle dragons. You test the movement in your elbow. It squeaks. Good. See, the armor wasn't just there to protect. It was there to project. Power. Poise. Precision. And yes, a little bit of noise. There's an actual recorded account from 1614, Siege of Osaka, where a young retainer walked into camp fully armored and made such a clatter that several other retainers stood and bowed, thinking a high-ranking general had arrived. The poor boy was just going to retrieve his dropped rice ball. But the point stands, how you sounded mattered. Historians still debate whether samurai armor was deliberately engineered to be audible, or if the sounds were simply an unavoidable side effect of traditional materials. Some argue it added to the intimidation. Others say it was just poor acoustical planning. Either way, you felt it. And so did everyone around you. You finished dressing, tugging on the final tie. And then, the helmet. It's heavy. Not in a crushing way, but in a presence kind of way. You lower it onto your head, adjusting for the padding and the way it subtly narrows your field of vision. Your breathing slows, becomes shallower. You become a little less human, a little more monument. And here's the wild part, you're not even in a duel. Not yet. This is just Tuesday. But you never know. That's the burden of honor. You don't get to say, I wasn't ready. You don't get to apologize mid-parry because your sash came loose or your shoulder guard pinched. If your gear betrays you, your blood's on your sleeve, and not in the poetic way. Still, the samurai found ways to compensate. One lesser-known trick? Using rice paste in the laces to stiffen them for duels, offering better control of how their armor flexed under pressure. Downside? If it rained, well, you were just a very crunchy rice cracker waiting to fall apart. You glanced toward the trees. No movement. Just fog and silence. And yet, dressed in layers of lacquered certainty, you feel ready. Not just to fight, but to exist. To walk through the world with the knowledge that if the worst happens, if a blade flashes from the shadows or a challenge is shouted across a rice field, you won't have to run inside and change. You're dressed for the end. Or for breakfast. Same thing, really? Hey guys. How's your day going? If it's been a great one, drop a number 1 in the comments to spread some positive energy. And if things haven't felt quite right, drop a number 2, because you're not alone. I'm here with you, walking this journey together, so that each moment ahead feels a little lighter, a little more peaceful. The fog lifts slowly as the sun rises higher, casting golden slats of light through the pine branches. The courtyard begins to hum with activity, servants sweeping, a rooster too late to matter, the clink of distant sandals. You adjust your sword at your hip. Just in case. That's when you hear it. A formal cough. not a clearing of the throat. A deliberate cough. The kind meant to get attention without breaching etiquette. You turn, and there he is. Another samurai, dressed not unlike you. But he wears his katajinu, those exaggerated shoulder flares meant for official occasions, and his hakama is freshly pressed. Crisp. Intentional. He bows low and polite, but his hand hovers near his sword. Oh boy. Here we go. He's not attacking you. Not yet. He's inviting you to duel. But not just with blades, with manners. Welcome to the strangest part of samurai life, dueling like a gentleman. Contrary to modern action films, not every confrontation was a chaotic bloodbath. In many eras, especially during the more regulated Edo period, duels were formalized. Ritualized. Almost. Polite. There were bows. There were exchanges of poetry. There were even outfit changes, because yes, dueling in the wrong robe could be seen as a grievous insult, not just a tactical disadvantage. So you nod. Just once. And then the ceremony begins. You retreat into the house, not to run, but to prepare. You change out of your armor. You don't need all that clanking. This isn't war. This is personal. Instead, you pull on a tailored kamishimo, formal duel attire, usually made of stiffened linen, dyed in subtle clan hues. It's light. Restrictive in some ways. Liberating in others. The sleeves are designed not to flap, the collar to stay out of your field of vision. You secure your obi, belt, with care, not too tight, not too loose. You need freedom to breathe. And to bleed. One last glance in the mirror. Yes, samurai use polished metal mirrors. And then you step outside again, where the challenger is. Already waiting. He has also changed. Good. Together, you walk to the dueling ground. It's not some cinematic battlefield. It's just a clearing near the plum trees, quiet and shaded. The petals fall like lazy snowflakes. Almost beautiful enough to distract you from the mortal tension. And now. The etiquette. First you bow. Deeply. Twice. Then you kneel, eyes locked. A silent agreement. This is not murder. This is honor. Your hands move in mirrored rhythm. Right hand on the tsuka, the hilt. Thumb pushes the guard slightly, just enough to loosen the blade. You inhale. And wait. Historians still debate whether most of these duels ended in death or simply in first blood. Some records suggest that fatal outcomes were the exception, not the rule. Others insist that once the swords left their scabbards, the gods decided. Either way, you'd better be dressed like you respect the outcome. And here's the quirky twist. Samurai were so committed to dueling decorum that they sometimes brought duel-specific swords. Slightly shorter, lighter, faster drawing. Because speed wasn't just a strategy, it was part of the dance. If your opponent died ugly, it meant you did it wrong. You draw. He draws. 2 flashes of steel. 1 breath. And it's over. You stand there, heart pounding in your throat, barely remembering what just happened. A single line of red appears across his forearm. He bows. You bow deeper. No words. No celebration. Just the rustle of your robes as you turn and walk away. Later, you'll clean the blade and fold the robe. You'll wonder what that duel was really about. A grudge? A misunderstanding? Or just a man needing to remind the world, and himself, that he still could? One thing is certain. If you had worn the wrong outfit, this entire ceremony would have fallen apart. You can't duel in a nap robe. And you sure as heck can't nap in what you're wearing now. You're back inside, breath finally slowing, fingers still tingling from the duel. The kamishimo clings to your back with the fine sheen of dried sweat, less from exertion, more from the sheer pressure of precision. Outside, someone is already raking the dueling ground, as if wiping away the memory of the challenge, as if conflict were nothing more than misplaced leaves. You slip out of the formal wear slowly. Carefully. Folded into neat squares. This isn't a quick change act. It's a ritual. Because what you wore just now wasn't clothing. It was communication. And no part of the samurai wardrobe was more expressive, or more judgmental, than the kimono. Forget what you've seen on TV. Samurai didn't all dress in uniform grays or endless browns. Their kimono were layered, symbolic, and specific. And if you think fashion wasn't part of battlefield readiness, then you've clearly never tried sprinting in 12 pounds of ceremonial silk. You pick up a new kimono now, one you wore earlier in the week, sea blue with a soft pine needle pattern woven subtly near the collar. The sleeves are wide, but not excessively so. It's informal, safe, relaxed, and yet it still says something. Because every kimono said something. The weave, the color, the emblem stitched onto the back, man, or family crest, each one a signal fire of identity. Wearing the wrong hue at the wrong event could insult your host, disgrace your ancestors, or, if you were particularly unlucky, get you challenged to another duel before you finished your rice. Historians still argue whether samurai actually wore vibrant colors in daily life or if the most extravagant garments were reserved for festivals and art. Some preserved garments suggest deep indigo, earthy ochres, even flashes of crimson, colors that meant status, not silliness. Others insist the drabber tones depicted in ink paintings better reflect everyday practicality. But let's be real, no one risks mustard yellow sleeves in muddy weather unless they really want to flex. Still, kimono weren't just about standing out. They were also about knowing your place. You could say 1,000 things without speaking a word, how long your sleeves hung, whether your garment wrapped left over right, the right way for the living, and even how tightly it was belted. Tightly? Alert. Loosely? Resting. Too loose? Possibly drunk. Or arrogant. Or both. And then there were the hidden messages. There's one preserved kimono in a Kyoto museum embroidered with a pattern of stylized birds, swallows, delicate and swooping across the back. To the untrained eye, just pretty decoration. But swallows, in that context, were a reference to a certain poem about loyalty and sacrifice. That particular combination of bird and border design? It told anyone who knew the poem. I would rather die serving than live fleeing. Imagine broadcasting that on your back during breakfast. You pull the sea blue kimono over your shoulders. It's cool at first, then warming as your body heat settles in. The silk moves with you, not against. It's quiet. Gentle. A robe for reflection. Not for war. Not for napping either, mind you, this is a walking around kimono. There are nap robes for that, and if you get caught sleeping in this one, someone's definitely going to talk about you behind a fan. And honestly, the fact that someone could identify your napwear from 20 paces? That says everything about how hyper-coded samurai fashion really was. Even downtime had a uniform. You tie your obi in a simple knot. No flourishes. No statement. You're not trying to impress anyone now. Just glide through the rest of the day unnoticed. That's the dream. Outside, someone calls your name again. Not for a duel this time, thankfully. It's the cook. Lunch is ready. You hesitate. You could change into a dining robe. But honestly? You're kind of overchanging outfits today. Still, better safe than gossip. You sigh. Time for another quick change. Because in the world of the samurai, wearing the wrong kimono to lunch wasn't a crime, but it might as well have been. The scent of grilled fish and miso drifts down the hall before you even reach the dining room. Your stomach growls, loud enough to draw a curious glance from a servant passing with folded towels. You bow slightly, trying to look more dignified than hungry, even as your mind is already counting how many bites you can sneak in before conversation starts. But first, yes, again, you change. This time it's into a soft katabira, a kind of informal kimono often made from hemp or lightweight cotton. Pale gray, with a barely noticeable wave motif near the hem. This is your dining robe. It's lighter, looser, easier to sit in without wrinkling anything expensive. There's no armor to weigh it down. No heavy folds to restrict your knees. You tie the obi with a neat twist, check the sleeves, short enough not to drag through your rice, and head toward the low table. Because yes, even lunch required strategic dressing. As you kneel at your place, the floor cool beneath your thighs, a quiet thought sneaks in. When do you get to rest? Like actually rest. Not this polite, postured version of stillness where your shoulders never quite relax, your ears never stop listening for challenge or insult or spilled soy sauce that might be interpreted as an omen. You exhale through your nose. That's when the thought hits you again. Napping. Glorious, vulnerable, forbidden in public napping. And suddenly, you can't stop thinking about it. You glance around the room. Low chatter, no visitors of high status, no scrolls to be read aloud, no senior officer giving a lecture on duty. Maybe after lunch. You finish your meal, steamed rice, pickled radish, grilled mackerel, trying to look contemplative rather than impatient. As soon as the bowls are cleared, you murmur something about meditative breathing and slip away like a silk ghost. Back in your quarters you prepare. Yes. You prepare to nap. Because if you think a nap was as simple as lying down in your dinner robe, you clearly haven't been paying attention. That would be a social catastrophe. You reach for your Yoroizuken. No, not armor, not this time. This is your nap kit. A thin cotton yukata, soft from many washings. It's pale, soothing in color, intentionally unsaturated. Blue-gray. Easy on the eyes. Loose, with broad sleeves that won't twist if you shift in your sleep. And no family crest. You wouldn't advertise your lineage while drooling. You change with deliberate slowness. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because it's part of the ritual. Folding your day robe. Laying it neatly. Slipping into the nap yukata like you're shedding everything, status, readiness, tension. And here's the thing, this isn't laziness. It's strategy. Samurai were warriors, yes. But they weren't machines. The human body needed rest, and the samurai knew this. Short, intentional naps were part of life, especially when the alternative was collapsing in your armor mid-patrol and waking up with a cramp so bad you couldn't draw your sword. A napping samurai was a smart samurai. And because the world was always one surprise away from chaos, you even napped ready. Here's a fringe historical tidbit for you. Some samurai kept their swords within arm's reach while napping, not sheathed in the belt, but propped upright against the door. That way, if someone barged in, you could grab it on the upswing. Others wore a soft sash with a hidden dagger tucked in, because you never knew if your afternoon nap might turn into your final dream. And it mattered what you wore during that nap. Historians still argue whether nap robes were standardized or if each house had its own traditions. Some say lords required servants to issue new yukata daily, ensuring no ill omens clung to the cloth. Others believe samurai rotated between just two robes, one worn, one washed. Either way, the nap was never spontaneous. It was a calculated risk. An intentional withdrawal from the front lines of posture and formality. You lie back, arms folded across your chest. The cotton whispers against your skin. The pillow is thin, stuffed with buckwheat hulls. Not exactly luxurious, but firm enough to support your neck in case, you wake up mid-roll and have to fight someone. You close your eyes. The room darkens. Or maybe it's just your body sinking. For a moment, you are not a warrior. You are not a name in a ledger. You are not a clan, or a crest, or a rank. You are just breath. And cloth. And silence. When you wake, it's with the disorienting softness of someone who forgot, for a brief and beautiful moment, that they might be stabbed in their hallway. The air is still. The shadows have shifted slightly across the floor, and a single beam of light cuts through the slats in the shoji screen, landing on your ankle like a warm thread. You flex your toes. No alarm bells. No shouts from the courtyard. No challenges waiting by the rice barrels. Which is good. You are, miraculously, alive. You sit up slowly, adjusting your nap yukata with one hand and rubbing your neck with the other. The buckwheat pillow did its job. No stiffness, no creaks. Just the mild embarrassment that you drooled a little and your hair is now aggressively lopsided. It's a peaceful moment. So naturally, your mind turns to rain. Not because it's raining, but because the sky outside has that silvery, uncanny light that only happens before a downpour. And rain, as you know all too well, can ruin your whole day, especially if you're a samurai trying to keep his honor and his socks dry. So you stand, rewrap your sash, and prepare for the next sartorial dilemma, the rain cloak. Not just any cloak, of course. The mino, a traditional Japanese raincoat made of woven straw. It looks like you've strapped a haystack to your back, but it works. Water rolls right off, and it keeps your arms free for drawing a sword. It's also shockingly itchy, especially in humid weather, but you deal with it. Because the alternative is worse. See, samurai were notoriously superstitious about rain, especially wet clothing. It wasn't just discomfort. It was bad luck. There was a belief in some regions that waterlogged sleeves could weaken your sword arm, making it sluggish or cursed. And no one wanted to be the guy who lost the duel because his kimono stuck to his elbow mid-swing. One preserved letter from a Tokugawa-era retainer warns his son. If your shoulders are soaked, do not draw, let the blade rest dry for the god's sake. It sounds dramatic. It probably was. But also, kinda fair. A damp kimono could chafe, tangle, and cause hesitation. And hesitation, in samurai logic, equaled death. So you pull on the mino. It scratches. It smells faintly of old straw and something else, history maybe. You adjust the hood. Not much of a hood, really. More of a flap that dares the rain to find your face. Underneath, your nap yukata has been replaced with a plainer travel kimono, dark blue, short-sleeved, higher hemmed. You're not planning to duel today, but you're not planning to not duel either. So you keep it tactical. As you step outside, the first drops begin to fall. Gentle at first, then with more insistence. The courtyard stones glisten. A servant runs past, trying to rescue drying scrolls with an armful of panic. You walk. Slowly. Your sandals slip slightly on the wet path, but you steady yourself. And here's the thing. There's something almost romantic about the rain. The way it hushes the world. The way your straw cloak turns into a little private roof. The way everyone else disappears behind shoji screens and overhangs, leaving you, briefly, as the only figure in the garden. It's a samurai moment. Not the sword kind. The movie kind. You know the one, slow motion, one leaf falling, a long pan over a pensive face. Except in reality, your shoulders itch, and you're wondering if you remembered to bring dry tabi socks. Tabi. Split-toed socks. We'll get to those. But for now you just walk. Not because you have somewhere to go, but because walking in the rain, with your blade at your side and your straw cloak crackling with each motion, makes you feel like part of something older than the weather itself. Historians still argue whether the samurai's fear of wet sleeves was practical or symbolic. Some say it was rooted in real experiences, soggy fights, rusted blades, slips on muddy ground. Others suggest it was metaphor, water representing hesitation, the loosening of control, the creeping of chaos into a world that demanded structure and poise. Either way, you respect it. You pause under a pine tree. The rain collects in needles and falls in tiny, rhythmic plops on the stone lantern nearby. You adjust your mino one more time, sighing softly. You are dressed for the rain. And that's enough for now. By the time you return to the main house, your straw cloak is shedding water in rhythmic little patters. You pause at the threshold, shake it off carefully. No one wants a puddle in the entry hall, and peel it away like a second skin. Underneath, your dark travel kimono is mostly dry, save for a few damp spots near the hem. You slide the mino onto a hook near the door where it will air out with the others, each one a limp bundle of straw waiting to be kneaded again. You wriggle your shoulders. The muscles there ache in that familiar, earned way. Inside, someone calls your name again. You groan internally. What now? Feasting. Of course. A visiting elder. A formal meal. Which means, yes, another outfit. You make your way toward your room, already imagining the heavier robes awaiting you. These won't be soft nap clothes or tactical travel garb. These will be layers of formality, thick, patterned, awkwardly long sleeves that look beautiful from across the room but make lifting a cup of sake a minor battle in itself. Because eating, in samurai culture, wasn't just biological. It was theatrical. You stepped behind the screen and reached for the feast kimono, a layered ensemble with a russet base and delicate cranes embroidered along the back hem. It's a seasonal symbol, appropriate for early autumn. The inner layer is pale ivory, the color of restraint and humility. The outer is bolder, signifying strength and poise. You shrug it on, tighten the obi with a stiff knot, and glance in the mirror. You look responsible, honorable, slightly overcooked. The sleeves are long enough to interfere with anything involving elbows. But again, that's not the point. You're not meant to eat quickly. You're meant to be seen eating thoughtfully. Feasting gear isn't about comfort. It's about power. And the room reflects that. When you enter, the meal is already in progress. Scrolls hang from the walls. The aroma of grilled eel mixes with incense. Cushions line the floor around a low lacquered table. Bowls are arranged like pieces on a strategy board, pickled vegetables, miso soup, simmered daikon, and those cubes of fish jelly that no one enjoys but everyone eats anyway. You kneel carefully, making sure not to sit on your sleeve. You bow. The elder bows in return. A servant pours sake. The first toast is spoken. And you eat. Or try to. Your sleeve slips into your rice bowl. You adjust. You reach for a slice of daikon and your sleeve brushes the soy dish. A quiet servant swaps it out, no comment. You nod thanks, inwardly cursing your ancestors for not inventing the short-sleeved inner shirt. Still you manage. And as the meal continues, you find yourself sliding into the rhythm of it. The precision of chopstick etiquette. The way no one speaks while chewing. The way the meal itself becomes a form of silent storytelling, each dish honoring the harvest, the guests, the season. It's weirdly peaceful. And then, of course, someone at the table brings up dueling. Because nothing says, "I'm full of grilled fish and gratitude." Like an unsolicited story about a guy losing an eye over a spilled cup of tea. One guest chuckles and says, "Of course, he shouldn't have worn that robe. The sleeves were like flags. He practically invited the blade." Laughter all around. You smile politely. Quietly adjust your sleeves. Try not to think about how many layers you're wearing and how none of them would help if someone drew a sword right now. Historians still argue whether feasting attire actually endangered samurai in sudden brawls or if that's mostly legend. One scroll from the mid-1600s describes a brawl breaking out at a plum blossom banquet. 3 men stabbed, 2 tripped over their robes, 1 fainted into a miso bowl. Hard to say if it really happened, but it's not hard to imagine. Still, this dinner ends peacefully. With warm sake, silent bows, and the gradual shifting of stiff knees. You return to your room once again. Remove the feast kimono slowly, arms aching a little from the constraint. You fold the robe carefully, never on the floor, always on a low table, and let your body breathe again. In your undershirt and cotton trousers, you feel like a peeled grape. Vulnerable. Free. Tomorrow, there may be more challenges. But tonight there's rest. You reach for your nap yukata again. Because after wearing a full buffet to dinner, there's only one thing left worth doing. Taking a very strategic nap. You fall into the futon like a man surrendering to gravity, not battle. The cotton yukata rustles as you settle in, fabric breathing against fabric, your arms resting on either side, just barely brushing the edge of the woven mat. There's no armor on your chest. No blade by your hip. Just the soft weight of a quilt, the far-off call of a night bird, and the steady drip, drip of rain from the eaves outside. But just as sleep begins to wrap its slow fingers around your ribs, something buzzes at the edge of your memory. Your mother's voice. Or maybe your tutor's. Even in sleep, dress with honor. Right. You sigh. Because even a nap at night, especially at night, had a uniform. You sit up again, this time with the resigned grace of a man who knows that danger can wear 1,000 faces. Bandits. Betrayal. Fires. Earthquakes. Revenge. A summons from your lord delivered at the most unreasonable hour. And in every case, you need to be able to move, run, bow, or fight within seconds. which means the nightwear mattered. You reach into the chest at the foot of your bedding and pull out your actual night kimono, thinner than the day yukata, stitched in soft cotton, cut closer to the body to prevent tangling if you had to rise suddenly. This one is a pale, nearly colorless gray, chosen not for aesthetics but for utility. It blends into the shadows. It doesn't show stains. And it won't blind you if someone lights a candle near your face at midnight. You slide into it, tying the sash loosely but securely, enough to move in, not so tight you can't breathe if you're woken by shouting. And then, one last detail. You pull your short sword, the wakizashi, closer to your bedding. Not in the bed. That would be ridiculous. And dangerous. No one wants to roll over onto a sacred blade. Instead, you nestle it just under the pillow's edge, where your hand can find the hilt without groping. This wasn't paranoia. This was protocol. Many samurai of rank slept beside their swords, even if it meant dreaming of blades slicing through clouds. In some castles, guards made nightly rounds to check that warriors were dressed properly for emergencies, even while asleep. One record from Edo mentions a retainer reprimanded for wearing a sleeping robe with inappropriately festive embroidery. The man didn't even know he'd broken protocol until he was demoted. Historians still debate whether nighttime attire among samurai was codified law or an evolving blend of house rules, superstition, and practical fear. Some households expected full underarmor readiness. Others simply required modesty and movement. But nearly all agreed, never be caught unready. And there's the fringe twist. Some samurai reportedly wore special amulets, or stitched charms inside their nightrobes. Not for fashion. For protection. From spirits. From curses. From dreams that turn too vivid to be trusted. You lie back again, now properly attired for danger or peace. Your hand rests near the wakizashi. Your breathing steadies. Outside, the rain has softened to a misty patter, like fingers drumming against the past. You close your eyes. And now, if someone bursts in, calling for help, screaming about an enemy breach, reporting that your lord has fallen ill and demands your presence, you'll rise in an instant. Dressed. Dignified. Deadly if need be. But if no one calls? Well, then you're simply sleeping in the world's most emotionally complex pajamas. Hey guys. If you enjoyed today's topic, drop a 1 in the comments. If it wasn't quite your thing, hit us with a 2, we're always looking to get better. You wake with the strange clarity that only comes from sleeping in a world where every second might demand a sword. Your body feels rested, but your mind is already scanning the room, just in case. The shadows are longer now, dusk edging into the walls. Somewhere, a wind chime tinkles softly. Peaceful. Suspiciously peaceful. You sit up. Stretch. Your night kimono falls open at the collar, and the evening breeze brushes your skin like the gentlest warning. Time to dress again. Not for battle. Not for sleep. For something in between. Because tonight there's bathing. And bathing in samurai culture wasn't just about getting clean. It was about ritual, ranking, and the finely tuned skill of undressing around people you might later have to kill. You make your way to the yuya, the communal bathhouse, a towel tucked into the crook of your arm, and your most humble robe tied around your waist. This isn't the time for flashy sleeves or embroidered family crests. It's the one space where you wear anonymity like armor. You slide open the door and are immediately hit with a wave of cedar steam and the soft slosh of water. The room smells of soaproot, wet wood, and the ghost of long evaporated eucalyptus. A few men are already soaking, their voices low and even. No shouting here. No weapons. Just towels and silence and the echo of dripping water. You settle into a washing stool near a wooden bucket and begin the process. First the rinse, then the scrubbing with a rice bran cloth. You move slowly, methodically. Not just to get clean, but to observe. Who enters? Who leaves? Who avoids eye contact? Because let's be honest, being naked next to people who definitely know how to kill you with a soup spoon takes a certain kind of mental agility. And yes, there were bathhouse rules. The unspoken ones were the most important. Rule 1. never talk about politics in the bath. Rule 2. Never take the middle spot in the tub unless you've earned it. Rule 3. Never ever wear your fancy robe inside. Bathing is where the social costume is stripped away, literally and symbolically. And yet, even here, the outfit matters. Your bathrobe is modest, undyed cotton worn soft. The hem stops at your knees, the sleeves don't billow. It's the exact right amount of "I'm clean and respectful," without veering into "I'm trying too hard to look humble." Historians still argue whether these bathhouse customs were universal or if they varied drastically between regions. Some scholars insist rural samurai bathed in open springs, unbothered by ceremony. Others argue that in castle towns, the bathhouse was the place where political alliances were born, or dissolved, in silence and steam. Then there's the quirky fringe tidbit. A few clans reportedly used unique scents, herbal infusions mixed into the rinse water, as subtle clan identifiers. Smelled like yuzu and mint? Probably from the northeast. Smelled like camellia and sassafras? Must be a border lord's son. A weirdly fragrant spy game. You finish scrubbing and step into the wooden tub. It's hot, blisteringly so. You sink into your collarbone, teeth clenched until the pain blooms into pleasure. You feel your muscles surrendering. The heat drawing out the dual tension, the feast fatigue, the strain of pretending all day that you weren't one wrong glance from violence. In this moment, you're just a person. A man in water. Breathing. Floating. But of course, it doesn't last. Someone sits down across from you. He nods politely. You nod back. You both pretend not to recognize each other from that thing at the spring festival. You know, the time he almost unsheathed his sword because your cousin insulted his poetry? Yeah. That thing. So you soak in silence. And when the heat becomes too much, you step out, towel off quickly, and don your drying robe, another lightweight wrap, often lined with absorbent cloth. You tie it at the waist. Nothing flashy. You're not here to win any bathhouse fashion contests. But you walk back to your room a little lighter. A little cleaner. A little more human. Until someone calls your name from down the corridor and mentions that your lord's advisor wants a word. Immediately. And you're still barefoot, in a robe that smells faintly of cedar. Lovely. You freeze mid-step, the drying robe clinging damply to your shoulders, and blink toward the servant who delivered the message. The advisor wants, what, now? They bow deeply. Your presence, honored one. At once. In the northern wing. You glance down at yourself. Bare feet. Wet hair. Robe that may or may not still be steaming slightly in the evening air. Fantastic. But in the world of samurai, showing up underdressed is only slightly better than not showing up at all. You nod once, serene on the outside, panicking on the inside, and pivot back toward your quarters with the determined gait of a man about to lose a race against formality. Because now you need a quick change. And not just any robe will do. The advisor is a stickler. You know this. He once demoted a stable boy for appearing with untied sandals. Which means you'll need to put on something formal enough to show respect, but not so formal that it looks like you're trying to impress him. It's a delicate balance. Samurai business casual, if you will. You reach for your jinbori. A sleeveless coat often worn over armor, the jinbori started as a military garment, but eventually evolved into something, well, swaggier. It's part fashion statement, part authority cloak. Yours is deep indigo with a charcoal trim, and a discreet mon stitched at the shoulder, your clan's emblem, small but unmistakable. You slip it on over a fresh dark kimono, feet sliding into indoor tabi, the kind with a slight sole in case you have to go outside again. Please, no. You check the mirror. It's not elegant, but it's dignified. You'll pass inspection. Out the door again. Down the corridor. The floorboards are warm from the day's sun, now fading. You pass paper lanterns, their light flickering against shoji screens like ghosts rehearsing for festival night. At the northern wing, you're announced before entering. Another servant opens the screen with an almost reverent slowness, revealing the advisor seated on a cushion near a low brazier. You bow deeply. Your jinbori sways slightly, perfectly timed. He gestures for you to sit. You're damp, he says dryly, his eyes flicking once to your hair. Yes, honored one. I was bathing when summoned. A small, satisfied nod. Good. He knows you responded immediately. You gain a few invisible points. The discussion is brief. A change in patrol rotations. A comment on your recent duel. A sideways reference to your father's service record, and how he never required reminders. You nod appropriately, speak only when spoken to, and keep your sleeves tucked properly, not letting them drift across the floor like an amateur. You notice, too, that he's wearing a robe with shortened sleeves and a layered collar, one designed for court work, but tailored for someone who might need to rise and gesture without knocking over an inkstone. Every fold speaks fluently in the dialect of hierarchy. Historians still argue how much meaning samurai placed on sleeve length alone. Some claim it was purely practical, others insist sleeves were semiotic weapons, broadcasting everything from social rank to emotional state. One minor noble supposedly communicated his displeasure with a political treaty by lengthening his left sleeve by 2 inches at a banquet. Subtle? Yes. Petty? Absolutely. And then there's the fringe story, told mostly in the border provinces, about a traveling ronin who wore sleeves deliberately mismatched to confuse would-be attackers about his sword hand. Clever, if not especially comfortable. You finish your audience with the advisor in the standard fashion: bow, pause, rise, bow again at the threshold. No wasted movements. You've learned that robes and posture go together like blade and scabbard. Back in your quarters, you finally shrug off the jinbori and sigh so deeply your ribs creak. You hang the garment carefully, smooth out its shoulders, and resist the urge to mutter something rude about sudden meetings. And then, at last, you reach for your evening robe. This one's softer, woven from brushed cotton, with a slightly frayed hem that you haven't bothered to mend because it's only worn in private. It's the clothing equivalent of a sigh. You drape it over your shoulders, knot it loosely, and sink onto the cushion by the window. You're not asleep. You're not armed. You're not needed. For now. You look out at the moonlight dusting the courtyard stones and think, this robe never leaves the house. And maybe that's the point. Sometimes you wear something not for battle, or dinner, or honor. Sometimes you wear it just to be yourself. The moon hangs heavy and low over the courtyard, a polished coin resting in the bowl of the sky. You shift slightly on your cushion, fingers absently tracing the soft weave of your robe's sleeve. It's the kind of night where silence doesn't just fall, it settles in like an old friend. You sip from a small ceramic cup of cool barley tea, the taste faintly nutty, the temperature just above forgettable. The robe you're wearing, your evening one, isn't ceremonial. It doesn't have a crest or stiff collar or brocade trim. But it has something better. It has memory. You wore the same robe on the night your cousin left for the northern border campaign. You wore it last autumn when you spent an entire evening reading poems out loud to a cat who absolutely didn't care. And you wore it last month when you mended the tear in its side seam after catching it on the garden gate. Poor stitching maybe, but yours. And that made it matter. That's something modern eyes rarely grasp about the samurai. It wasn't just the weapons or the rituals. It was the living in between. The quiet hours. The way something as simple as a robe could hold more weight than a blade. There's a soft knock at your doorframe. You look up. It's one of the younger attendants. He bows awkwardly, holding something behind his back. Forgive me, he says, but the seamstress left these for you. He reveals a folded bundle of cloth, new undergarments, of all things. You blink. He bows again, disappears into the hallway like smoke. You stare at the bundle, bemused. Because yes, even underwear had rules. The fundoshi, traditional Japanese undergarment, was simple, sure, but it still had flair. A long strip of cloth wrapped and tucked in various ways depending on your status, your activity, and occasionally your mood. There were day versions, night versions, combat-ready ones, and versions meant purely for festivals, because nothing says ready to wrestle in a rice field like decorative loincloths. You unfold the one just delivered. It's new, clean, and somehow has a small stitch detail at the corner. Just a tiny knot of thread in navy blue. Decorative? Possibly. Protective charm? Maybe. Passive-aggressive note from the seamstress? Likely. You smile. Historians still debate how strictly samurai followed undergarment traditions. Some argue it was utilitarian at best, a way to protect the outer garments from sweat and wear. Others believe that proper underlayers were considered just as important as outer dress, especially in homes where you might be summoned to kneel in front of your lord at any moment. Imagine flashing a scandalous fold of unhemmed cloth. Dishonor. And then there's the quirky tale, told mostly among older monks, of a famed warrior who lost a duel not because of speed or strength, but because his fundoshi came loose mid-swing and tripped him. The story ends with him refusing to wear undergarments ever again. You assume he sat very carefully from that day forward. You tuck the fresh one away for tomorrow and return to your moonlit moment, the soft cotton of your evening robe pulled close. It's strange. In a world where everything is so often loud, armor clanking, blades flashing, formal greetings delivered in perfectly timed syllables, what you remember most are these quiet, tactile details. The brush of fabric against wrist. The whisper of cloth as you shift your weight. The way a robe can be both a shield and a sigh. You close your eyes and lean back. Somewhere nearby, a bamboo fountain tips with a hollow clack. It reminds you to exhale. Tomorrow will bring more layers. More changes. More reasons to dress for honor, for survival, for other people. But for now, you're just skin and breath and quiet folds of cotton. You're exactly where you need to be. You wake before the sun, which is both impressive and deeply annoying. Your eyes blink open to a ceiling that's still painted with night. Somewhere outside, a rooster is clearly confused, or ambitious, or both. You lie there, warm under the quilt, perfectly comfortable in your soft evening robe, and yet you know it can't last. Not because anything's wrong, but because it's bath day for your socks. Specifically your tabi, the split-toe socks worn by every self-respecting samurai. You slide one foot out from under the blanket and wiggle your toes. Dirty. Definitely dirty. Yesterday's rain didn't do you any favors. And now there's a whole system to follow. Because tabi weren't just footwear. They were status symbols. Movement enhancers. Silence producers. And if you messed up, humiliating foot gloves that exposed everything about your hygiene and personal discipline. You sit up and stretch. The air has that just before dawn chill that clings to the floor like spilled ink. You cross to your footlocker and pull out a fresh pair, soft and starched, tied with tiny cords that require more dexterity than you should be expected to possess before breakfast. You sit and begin the work. Right foot first. Always. A superstition that turned into tradition. Slide the big toe into its little cotton channel, then the rest into the wider pocket. Tug gently. Smooth the heel. Repeat for the left. Then the ties, crisscrossed around the ankle, tucked into themselves like tiny fabric promises. You stand. Wiggle your toes again. Yes. Now you're ready to walk the world with purpose and frictionless grace. Historians still argue about the origin of the split-toe design. Some say it was invented purely to accommodate straw sandals, zore, which required a thong between the toes. Others believe it was about balance, improving posture and foot awareness during martial movement. Either way, tabi became a mark of readiness. Clean tabi? Prepared. Worn tabi? Maybe distracted. No tabi? Either a peasant or someone deeply drunk. And then there's the fringe belief held by certain sword schools, that the space between the big toe and the others was symbolic, representing the balance between aggression and restraint. Step with your heel, they taught, but decide with your toes. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds profound enough to repeat to an apprentice someday. You grab your sandals and step outside, the wooden soles clacking gently against the polished floor. With clean tabi and a decent robe, you suddenly feel about 15% more honorable. It's irrational. but real. Outside, the world is gray-blue and damp. A servant is already sweeping the path. He bows without looking up. You nod in return. You pass through the outer corridor toward the laundry space, where your used socks will be soaked in rice water and ash, scrubbed by hand, and hung on a line that runs like a string of white birds above the koi pond. Because even your socks get the full ritual treatment. And if that sounds excessive, remember, a samurai's honor could start at his ankles. There's an infamous case in one war journal. A visiting emissary refused to remove his footwear before entering a noble house. When he finally did, it revealed his tabi were mismatched, one with a fraying seam. The host saw it, said nothing, and cancelled the entire alliance the next morning. Petty? Maybe. But in this world, a thread can speak louder than a sword. You hand off the worn socks to the laundry matron, who gives you a curt nod. You get the sense that she judges people by the state of their tabi. You wouldn't dare cross her. Back in your room, you sit again. Recenter. Reknot your robe. It's still early. The sun hasn't committed yet. You could train. Or you could read. Or you could just breathe. For now, you choose breathing. Because sometimes, in the rhythm of changing outfits and adjusting posture and counting sword strokes, you forget that existing, quietly, cleanly, with properly tied socks, is its own kind of victory. You're halfway through your third breath when a quiet clatter breaks the silence, just outside your door, just loud enough to raise an eyebrow. You rise. Step lightly. Slide the door open with a practiced, whispery ease. There, on the polished wood of the hallway, sits a servant girl. Or more accurately, a girl who was a servant until about 5 seconds ago when she dropped the household's clean laundry basket and became a public disgrace in her own mind. Cotton garments spill around her like fallen leaves, robes, undersashes, a spare towel, and tabi. She looks up at you, mortified, her lips already forming apologies. You kneel beside her without a word, gathering the fallen items and setting them neatly back into the basket. No shouting. No lecture. Just the sound of folded cloth and shared silence. She bows so low her forehead nearly taps the floor. You nod and return to your room, leaving her to gather the last of her pride. And as you slide the door shut again, you think, thank the gods I wasn't wearing my formal indoor slippers. That would have sent a very different message. Because yes, even your feet's clothing inside the house mattered. You glance down now at your zora, the flat straw sandals typically worn with tabi for outdoor movement. Not appropriate inside. So, you swap them quickly for your warajinaka, soft-soled slippers for indoor use. Quieter. Less formal. Just right for lounging, practicing, or receiving unexpected visitors. But now it's time to work. You rise and begin wrapping your hands in cloth for training. Not heavy-duty armor. Just protective bands, teko, to steady your grip and keep calluses from cracking during repeated strikes. The cloth is dark, worn smooth from months of sweat and repetition. You choose your practice gi next, a dark indigo top and loose trousers, tied securely to stay out of the way. It's designed for movement. Breathable. Simple. No flared sleeves. No stiff collar. The closest thing to a samurai version of gym clothes. And yes, even here, among splinters and bruises and dust, the outfit tells a story. You head toward the dojo, passing 2 young warriors already warming up with wooden swords. Their practice robes match yours, save for slight differences in sleeve length and belt width, both indicators of training level, according to tradition. The floorboards of the dojo are smooth and polished, smelling of pine and effort. You step onto the mat, bowing at the waist, your sleeves remaining politely still. Nothing flapping. Nothing scandalous. And here comes your sparring partner. He's your age, maybe a little younger, with the kind of confidence that wraps around his gi like a second belt. You bow. He bows deeper. You smile slightly. This will be fun. Wooden swords are drawn, bakken, heavy and worn from use. They clash with a satisfying crack, sending vibrations up your arm. You pivot. Step. Swing again. The practice robe breathes with you. It doesn't restrict. Doesn't tangle. It was made for this dance. Your feet glide across the mat, socks whispering, the cotton of your pants swaying like wind-cut grass. Historians still debate how standardized samurai training attire was across regions. Some believe it varied wildly, certain clans preferring short sleeves and minimal layers for mobility, others enforcing strict uniformity as a sign of discipline. One account even describes a clan where robes were dipped in ash water before practice to encourage toughness. They also lost a lot of students to coughing fits. Small price for grit. And here's a quirky tidbit. In some dojos, the belt was tied with a specific knot pattern to identify your lineage or school. A double-folded diamond meant you studied under a Kyoto master. A sunrise twist meant your teacher once fought pirates. Probably. The stories got vague around the third round of sake. You finish your bout breathless, smiling. You bow again. Mutual respect laced into cotton and rhythm. Back in your quarters, you peel off the practice GI. The sweat is already drying into the threads. You'll rinse it yourself later. Some warriors prefer it that way. A kind of quiet penance. You tug on your soft robe again. Not the evening one. Not the formal one. Just the middle of the day, nobody's watching robe. Because in this brief moment, before the next summons, the next decision, the next necessary transformation, you get to be what every samurai secretly wanted to be. Comfortable. You slump down onto the cushion like someone who just dodged both a flying bakken and a philosophical crisis. The kind of exhaustion that hits not only your arms but your soul. You roll your shoulders, feeling the quiet complaint of well-used muscles. The soft robe you've changed into whispers around your body like a satisfied sigh, draping you in a moment of grace. But then comes the knock. Not urgent. Not timid. Just firm. You know that knock. You open the door slowly, half expecting another servant with more fabric-related drama. Instead, you see him. Your cousin. And judging by the way he's dressed, half formal, half angry, he's here for something. He steps inside without waiting for an invitation, his hakama flaring slightly with each step. You can tell immediately that something's off. His kosode is wrinkled, the obi tied just a touch too tight. His hair, usually smooth as a rice field in spring, is a mess. And worst of all, he's not wearing his sleeves properly. They're half-tucked. Disrespectfully informal. He sits across from you like a storm cloud trying to be polite. I saw the patrol list, he says finally. You blink. Ah. That. I requested the Western Pass. You gave it to Sakai. You nod once. Not because he's right. But because he's family, and this conversation will go nowhere if you challenge his honor head-on. You weren't available. You reply simply. Because I was at the memorial rites. For a horse. You add gently. He glares. You wait. The room is silent except for the breeze brushing the shoji screens and the quiet shifting of your robes. Your cousin looks down and suddenly seems to realize how poorly dressed he is for an argument. He tugs at his sleeve, tries to smooth it, and fails. And here's where it gets strange. Because samurai didn't just argue with words. They argued with presentation. If you barged into a superior's room without tying your sleeves, you were making a statement. I'm too angry to care. Or too arrogant. Or too reckless. In any case, it never helped. So you stand. Walk quietly to the cabinet. Retrieve a spare soritsuke, a sleeve tie, dyed in deep blue silk. You kneel beside him and extend it silently. He looks at you for a long moment. Then sighs. I shouldn't have come like this. You say nothing. He takes the tie and begins refastening his sleeves properly. And just like that, the tension begins to dissolve. Historians still argue how deeply clothing etiquette influenced interpersonal relationships among samurai. Some suggest it was almost theatrical, an extension of public posturing. Others argue it was psychological, a way to reassert emotional control by physically realigning oneself. Regardless, one thing is clear. How you wore your robe told everyone how you were holding yourself together. There's even a fringe account of a duel being cancelled when one warrior noticed the other hadn't tied his sash correctly and said, "You are not ready to die. Let us speak again tomorrow." You offer your cousin tea. He accepts. No more words about patrols. No apologies either. Just two men sitting in soft robes, sipping quietly. And you realize something else. This robe, simple, unmarked, never worn in public, has seen more truth than any armor you own. It's heard secrets, held exhaustion, absorbed moments of grief, comfort, and occasionally miso. It's the robe you always wear when you're most yourself. Your cousin rises after finishing his cup. He bows. You bow deeper, acknowledging not just his visit, but the quiet truce it carried. As he leaves, you run your fingers along your own sleeve, smoothing it without thought. It's not for anyone else. Just for you. Because sometimes tying your sleeves is how you start to forgive. You sit in stillness after your cousin leaves, listening to the soft hush of the paper door sliding closed, and for a long moment, nothing moves. Then you exhale, long and slow, as if your bones needed the breath more than your lungs. And finally, you laugh. Not loudly. Not mockingly. Just a small puff of air that escapes the corner of your mouth like a confession. Because you remembered something. A story. A ridiculous, entirely true story. You stand up and walk toward the small chest where your old robes are folded, retired, but never discarded. You open it, and there it is, the robe that almost got you killed. It's horrible. Peach-colored. Too tight across the shoulders. An awkward crane pattern stitched slightly off-center, like the bird was trying to fly but didn't believe in itself. You pull it out gently, like lifting an old battlefield relic, and run your fingers across the faded embroidery. There's still a tear under the left arm, bad stitching. Yours. You smile. Because this was the robe you wore the day you accepted a dinner invitation. Without realizing it would include a surprise archery contest. You tied your sash wrong. Just a little too high, cinching the robe tighter than intended. Looked fine when you were sitting. But when it came time to rise and step up to the firing line, you could barely lift your elbow without dragging the collar into your mouth. The first shot flew sideways into a bush. The second skimmed a lantern. The third? Let's just say you relit that lantern. Very dramatically. Your opponent laughed so hard he dropped his arrow. You wanted to melt into the floor. Because this robe wasn't just ugly. It betrayed you. Trapped you. Mocked you in cotton. And the worst part? You had chosen it to look confident. You wanted to stand out. Impress a nobleman's daughter. All it did was restrict your draw and showcase your poor tailoring decisions to half the province. Historians still argue about whether death by wardrobe was a real risk among samurai. There are certainly records of warriors complaining about tight robes or faulty sandals during combat. One scroll from the early 1600s details a duel in which a sleeve caught on a branch, pulling the warrior backward mid-draw. The final line reads simply, "He died with surprise in his eyes and bark in his sleeve." There's even a niche phrase, shikifukazimi, loosely translated as death by ceremonial wear. Used sarcastically, of course, but it stuck. You fold the peach robe again, slower this time. You can't bring yourself to discard it. It's part of your story. A chapter titled, "When Fashion Attacked." The funny thing is, the robe wasn't cursed. You just wore it like you were invincible. Like style could replace readiness. Like the shape of the crane would lend you grace. That's not how robes work. They don't make you something you're not. But they do reflect who you are. Your sleeves don't fight for you. But they reveal you. And sometimes, they restrain you when you're not being honest. You place the robe back into the chest. Close the lid gently. It creaks, as if agreeing with your thoughts. And now, back in your reliable middle robe. The one that's been with you through thick and thin, duel and tea, funeral and poetry reading, you feel grounded. Clothed in humility. Cloaked in memory. No embroidery needed. Evening settles like ink into parchment. The clouds part just enough to let a shy half-moon glance across the rooftops, casting silver shadows onto the courtyard stones. You step out once more, wrapped in your everyday robe, modest, charcoal gray, with soft wear marks around the collar and sleeves. The air smells of pine and wet soil. You breathe it in. And as you walk the garden path, you think about color. Not metaphorically. Literally. Because in samurai life, color could be the difference between life, death, respect, or the world's coldest passive-aggressive insult. You kneel near the edge of the koi pond, watching the orange and white fish drift beneath the surface like silk brushstrokes come to life. They flash their colors openly. Proudly. You, however, had to be careful. That's because color, on a samurai's robe, sash, or sleeve, was a coded language. A language spoken silently, but always noticed. The deep indigo you're wearing now? It signals humility. Reliability. Common among retainers who didn't wish to outshine their lords. It's the color of work, of tradition, of quietly doing what must be done. Crimson? That was something else entirely. Bright red was the hue of defiance, of fearlessness. Sometimes of recklessness. In battle, it hid blood. In court, it announced ambition. There's a famous story about a young samurai wearing crimson underarmor during peace talks, just in case the talks failed. It didn't go unnoticed. Or unpunished. Even the dye mattered. Indigo came from fermented leaves. Earthy. Honest. But saffron yellow? That was expensive. Reserved for nobility and ceremonies. If someone showed up to a sword inspection in yellow silk, they were either extremely important, or about to be. Historians still argue over the strictness of these color rules. Some records imply that regional customs varied widely, with coastal clans embracing brighter hues than their inland counterparts. Others suggest that color codes were enforced rigidly, especially during the Tokugawa shogunate. One wrong shade could mean exile, or worse, conversation. But perhaps the most dangerous color of all? Green. Not because it was flashy. Not because it was loud. But because it was so rare. The green dye, especially the kind made from true Japanese indigo blended with turmeric or malachite, was unstable. Hard to produce. Expensive. Wearing green hinted that you had money and taste, which meant people would ask questions. And samurai hated questions they couldn't answer with a single clean sword stroke. You shift your weight on the stone ledge and trail a finger through the pond's surface, watching the ripples fan out. Your robe doesn't flap. It doesn't need to. The color speaks for you. You remember one winter ceremony years ago, when you wore dark plum, a deep purple tone reserved for mourning. You didn't know the host's brother had just passed. You hadn't intended to insult anyone. But the room had gone quiet when you walked in. And the host's mother had stared at your sleeves like they were ghosts. You stayed for exactly 1 cup of tea. No more. Since then, you've played it safe. Grays. Blues. The occasional navy with subtle patterning. Colors that disappear into shadow. Colors that let you be present without being the subject. You think of battlefields, where friends wore family colors boldly, dyes that marked them as targets. You think of funerals where white, not black, was the robe of mourning. Purity. Surrender. Absence. And you think of a certain kimono your father wore only once, a brilliant sunset orange with a bronze threaded belt. Worn to his final promotion. The robe was folded and burned with him. You still remember how it glowed in the torchlight. Now here you sit. Charcoal robe. Bare feet. 1,000 thoughts. And all around you, the garden sighs in shades of green and silver, colors no one dares wear but everyone secretly longs for. Because in the world of the samurai, color was not fashion. It was message. And sometimes you just wanted to go unnoticed. Sometimes that was the safest color of all. The wind picks up, gentle but deliberate, tugging at your sleeves like a child wanting attention. You pull your robe a little tighter and begin the slow walk back toward the main house. Gravel crunches softly under your sandals. Overhead, the clouds drift like ink stains across the moon. Autumn is here. You can feel it in your knees. And with autumn comes obligation. Because this time of year, the samurai wardrobe had to change, not just for comfort, but out of moral responsibility. You slide open the door to your quarters and begin the seasonal ritual, the switching of robes. You kneel before the cedar chest that holds the next phase of your identity. Inside, perfectly folded, are the autumn kimono, slightly thicker fabric, deeper colors, and most importantly, proper lining. The inner cotton padding sewn between silk layers isn't just for warmth. It's for virtue. To wear a summer robe in fall was considered lazy, undisciplined, and disrespectful to the shifting spirit of the season. Yes, even nature expected you to dress accordingly. You carefully lift out the first robe. It's burn umber, with a subtle maple leaf motif stitched along the hem. The color speaks of turning leaves, waning sunlight, and quiet resolve. It is the garment of someone who knows how to let things go without making a sound. You change slowly, with reverence. The summer robe is folded and laid to rest until next year. You pull on the autumn robe. The sleeves feel heavier, but grounded. You tie the obi in a neat loop. No embellishment. Just steadiness. Historians still debate how widespread these seasonal dressing customs were. Some argue they were primarily practiced by higher-ranking samurai in castle towns, where appearances were scrutinized like poems. Others insist even rural retainers changed their wardrobes on the equinox out of sheer superstition. After all, no one wanted to offend the kami of seasonal change, who, by the way, were rumored to hate linen in October. Then there's the fringe belief that wearing robes out of season could throw off your body's energy, disrupting your ki and making you easier to defeat in battle. A famous fencing school even taught specific seasonal footwork, claiming winter stances should dig deep like roots, while spring movements should bend without breaking. You finish changing and sit quietly on the floor, the robe rustling softly as you settle in. It's strange how fabric can shift your entire state of mind. In your summer robe, you were breezy, quick, fluid. Now, wrapped in the hues of falling leaves, you feel slower. Wiser, maybe? Like someone who thinks before speaking, and never asks a question they don't already know the answer to. You rise and walk to the porch. The night air bites gently at your cheeks. Somewhere, a temple bell rings once, distant and low, like a deep breath echoing through the valley. The world is turning. And you are turning with it. Because to dress for the season wasn't just etiquette. It was acceptance. A way to live in harmony with a world that never stayed the same. And to pretend otherwise? To cling to summer when autumn had already come? That wasn't just foolish. It was dishonorable. You sit beneath the overhang, watching a few early leaves drift down into the courtyard. You tuck your hands into your sleeves, not because of the cold, but because you've learned something. Sometimes, warmth comes from choosing the right fabric. And sometimes, dignity is just knowing what not to wear anymore. You remain on the porch longer than you should, watching the leaves turn lazy pirouettes in the wind before surrendering to gravity. One lands near your sandal. A tiny red fragment, shaped like a teardrop or a tongue of flame. You reach down, pick it up, and twirl it between your fingers. Its color matches the lining of your nightwear. You smile at the thought. Because yes, even sleep had a seasonal dress code. You rise, stretch, and return inside, the autumn robe falling around you like a soft curtain. The candles flicker in the corners of the room, casting golden puddles across the tatami mats. It's time for bed. But first, bedclothes. Not the lightweight summer yukata you wore just a few weeks ago, with its pale indigo clouds and soft weave. Tonight calls for the autumn version, thicker, warmer, closer fitting to the body. You slide open the drawer where it waits, brushed cotton, deep gray-green, with a faint scent of cedar still clinging from the storage box. You disrobe slowly, folding your day robe with the kind of care you only give to things that have served you well. Then you slip into the sleeping kimono. The fabric hugs your skin, insulating but not oppressive. The sleeves are short enough not to twist around your arms if you turn in the night. The hem is cut just above your ankles, so you won't trip if you're startled awake and have to rise fast. Because yes, that's part of the design. Everything in samurai life, even sleepwear, was shaped by the idea that you might not get to finish your dreams. You tie the belt loosely but not lazily. A knot you can undo with one hand if needed. Then you settle onto the futon, quilt already pulled back, and rest your wakizashi near the edge, within arm's reach, as always. You lie there, eyes open, ears tuned. Crickets sing. Wind stirs. Wood creaks in the bones of the house. And in all of that you feel safe. Why? Because you're dressed for it. Historians still argue whether samurai sleepwear was as specific and formalized as other garments. Some suggest nightrobes were simplified versions of casual wear. Others believe that designated sleeping attire, carefully chosen and seasonally appropriate, was a sign of a disciplined house. Diaries from certain daimyo households even mention punishments for appearing at midnight drills in inappropriate nightclothes. Imagine sprinting half asleep in the wrong robe and getting demoted. Brutal. There's even a fringe story about a samurai lord who designed an entire line of sleepwear for his retainers, color-coded by rank. His name? Lord Shigehira. His obsession? Matching pajamas. His fate? Poisoned by a jealous tailor. Allegedly. Possibly apocryphal. Definitely dramatic. You chuckle softly at the thought. But then a new memory surfaces. That night years ago, when you were still a junior retainer, barely 16, wide-eyed and too proud. The fire alarm had sounded in the middle of the night. You bolted out of bed, half-dressed, hair wild, and wearing a robe 2 sizes too short because your real one had torn and you hadn't wanted to tell anyone. The ridicule lasted for weeks. From that night on, you made sure every robe fit properly, even the ones meant for dreams. You pull the quilt over your chest. Let your hands rest on your belly. Your breath slows. Your mind begins to drift, not with chaos but with calm. And you think, how strange. How comforting. That in a world filled with swords and shadows and expectations you can't always meet, you still get to choose what you wear to sleep. A robe that holds you like a trusted friend. Not armor. Not ceremony. Just peace in the form of cotton and care. And tomorrow? You'll rise. Fold this robe again. And dress for whatever else the day demands. But for now, you're dressed for dreams. You drift into sleep as if cradled by the robe itself, its folds soft against your skin, its weight a quiet hand across your chest. No dreams visit at first. Just the silence of a world well dressed and briefly at peace. But then, a knock. Again. Always a knock. You jolt awake, not with fear but with readiness. A kind of sleepy, practiced dignity. Your hand finds the hilt of your wakizashi as easily as your breath finds rhythm. You don't even need to think. You rise. Still half in dreams, but dressed properly for waking. A voice calls from beyond the screen. A whisper. Forgive me, there's news. You don't need to ask what kind. Because when someone comes this late, it's never about poetry or plum wine. You slip out of bed, feet quiet against the floor. No fumbling. No shameful scrambling into clothes. You're already in them. Your nightrobe, chosen carefully, tied correctly, with just enough movement in the sleeves to draw steel or pull someone from a burning building. That's the secret, isn't it? You don't dress for now. You dress for what might become. You slide open the door. The servant bows quickly and hands you a message sealed in red wax. Urgent. You nod and dismiss him with a glance. And now you must change. Not because what you're wearing is wrong, but because it's no longer enough. You kneel before the chest. Your hand hovers over several robes. Black means death. Blue means calm. Red, well, red means spectacle. But tonight you reach for white. Not funeral white. Not mourning white. This is a robe reserved for moments of clarity. A thick-lined garment, simple in its shape, modest in its pattern. But there's power in that restraint. When you wear it, people notice. Because it says, this is not about show. This is about truth. You slide it on slowly, smoothing the fabric across your chest, tying the belt with practiced certainty. Then you reach for the overcoat, subtle gray, thick-collared. You need its weight. The message, once read, confirms what you suspected, a matter of justice. A local retainer has accused one of your men of dishonor. A formal inquiry is being called. At dawn. And you are expected to appear. Represent your household. Defend your truth. You finish dressing. Slide your sword into its sash. Glance once at the mirror. And yes, this outfit will do. Historians still debate how deeply attire shaped outcomes in samurai diplomacy. Some say it was everything, your robe, your posture, your choice of knot. Others claim those details mattered less than the voice that came from behind the cloth. But the truth? Both mattered. There's a story, likely exaggerated, of a samurai who arrived late to a council meeting but was forgiven because his robe was so perfectly pressed and his obi tied in a knot known only to elders of the sword school. The message was clear: I may be late, but I am no fool. You step outside into the cold. Stars overhead. A sliver of moon. And your sleeves move like pages in a book that's just about to turn. This is not battle dress. Not sleepwear. Not feast attire. This is the robe of responsibility. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't draw attention. But it holds everything steady. Including you. The air bites at your face as you step beyond the gates. It's still dark, just the faintest hint of silver creeping over the eastern hills. The road to the magistrate's compound is silent, save for the crunch of your sandals against the frost-kissed path. And yet, you walk without hesitation. Because you're wearing the robe of responsibility. And that changes everything. People rise early in this province. Lanterns flicker to life behind paper screens. Courtyard fires are stirred back to warmth. A farmer pauses on his way to the well and bows as you pass, recognizing the weight of your outfit. Not because it's fancy, but because it isn't. It's serious. You approach the compound gates just as the guards unbolt them for the morning. They nod once, wordlessly, and let you through. No ceremony. No delay. Because your robe says it all. This man has arrived for something that matters. Inside, you kneel in a waiting room lit by a single candle. The walls are bare. The silence absolute. You don't fidget. You don't fix your sleeves. You don't need to. You've worn this robe before. Once, when you stood witness to a trial involving a stolen rice shipment. Once, when you informed a mother that her son would not return from the border patrol. Once, when your own name had been questioned, falsely, but publicly. This robe is a companion in storms. The door slides open. A court officer bows and gestures. You rise, each motion smooth and silent, and follow him down the corridor to the hearing chamber. There, seated formally on the raised platform, is the magistrate. His robe is dark green, embroidered with a chrysanthemum in muted gold. It says, I am both powerful and tired. You kneel before him, flanked by the accuser and a clerk with ink-stained hands. The accused, your junior, sits across from you, visibly pale. He's dressed too well. Nervous people overdress. His sleeves tremble when he bows. And now, the questions begin. It's all formality. Protocol. The dance of duty. You speak when spoken to. Answer clearly. Keep your robe straight and your tone level. The magistrate listens. The accuser presses. The scribe writes everything down as if recording scripture. And all the while, you remain still. Because your robe speaks for you. Not flashy but firm. Not loud, but unmistakably prepared. Historians still argue over how much actual power appearance held in these hearings. Some say attire was a footnote. Others insist that a poorly chosen color or a sloppy fold could tip the scale. One account tells of a retainer who lost his case and his position because his collar had folded inside out during questioning, a symbol of internal dishonor. You believe it? Because as the testimony draws to a close, the magistrate looks at you, not your junior, not the accuser, and asks simply, Do you vouch for him? You bow, and when you speak, your voice is the robe. Calm. Measured. Certain. I do. He studies you for a long moment. Not your words. Your sleeves. Your posture. The way your robe drapes with the weight of someone who doesn't bluff. Then he nods once. Then so be it. Just like that, the tide turns. The accuser bows and withdraws, unsatisfied but bound by protocol. Your junior collapses inward with relief, muttering thanks you don't need. You bow to the magistrate. Deeper than necessary. Because he didn't believe your words. He believed your presentation. Back outside, the sun has finally breached the ridge. Warmth spills down the mountainside. You walk home slowly, the wind stirring your sleeves like flags after battle. Not because you won something flashy, but because you stood, and spoke, and wore the truth. And in a world where everything can be questioned, that's victory enough. By the time you return home, the frost has melted into beads along the garden railing, and the house smells of rice porridge and simmering ginger. A sparrow hops along the veranda, pecking once at your sandal before deciding you're far too serious for breakfast company. You slide the gate closed behind you with a small exhale. The robe of responsibility is still warm with the memory of that hearing, its threads holding the weight of loyalty, restraint, and the kind of composure that leaves you quietly exhausted. You pause in the corridor, fingers grazing the soft outer layer. It's time to take it off. But not toss it aside. Never that. You return to your room and carefully fold the robe, not just in neat quarters, but in intention. The sleeves go in first. Then the body. Then the final tuck that says, "Thank you for not failing me today." And then, standing there in only your underrobe, you wonder what to wear next. Because now the tension has lifted. The morning fire is fading, and what's left is something gentler. Something a little silly even. You reach for the old indigo kimono. Not the nice one. Not the one with perfectly hemmed edges or crisp lines that hold shape even after a full day of bending. No. This one is faded. A little frayed around the wrists. You've spilled tea on it twice. There's a loose thread near the collar you refuse to cut. Superstition, maybe, or just sentimentality. But most importantly, this robe feels like you. You slip it on. The cotton gives without argument. You tie the obi in a lazy loop. Not careless. Just honest. Because you're not meeting a magistrate now. You're not leading an inspection or attending a funeral or receiving guests who judge you from your collar down. You're going to the back garden. To rake leaves. You step outside and grab the bamboo rake leaning beside the pail. The garden is scattered with golden fans, ginkgo, maple, pine needles, a mess of color and memory. And here's the part most people miss. Even this raking, this rustling of earth and leaf, had an outfit. Not officially, perhaps. But culturally? Spiritually? Absolutely. There was a robe for tending to the mundane. A garment that carried no crest. One that didn't cling when you bent forward or catch wind like a flag. A robe that welcomed dirt and time and silence. Historians still argue whether samurai truly separated work robes from formal ones with any regularity. Some sources say yes, especially in households where gardening, carpentry, and cooking were rotated among lower retainers. Others claim the distinction was more personal, passed down through family habits. There's even an old proverb. A robe that can serve tea and sweet pine needles is worth more than silk that only bows. You start raking. The sound is soothing. Dry scrape, soft sigh. Your sleeves pull back just enough to keep your hands free. Your hem brushes the stone. The wind tugs gently but gives up. This robe doesn't billow. It stays with you. And here's the strange, lovely truth. You feel more yourself in this humble, dusty old kimono than you ever did in anything gold-threaded or ceremonial. Because this robe doesn't demand anything of you. It just lets you be. You pause. Lean on the rake. Watch as the light filters through the trees. One leaf drifts down, landing neatly on the pile you've made, like punctuation. And in that moment, you realize something. The samurai didn't just live in a world of robes. They moved through one. A daily scroll of fabric and meaning, folded, tied, shaken out, dirted, rinsed, honored. every thread a choice. And today? You chose simplicity. The wind shifts, and with it, the mood of the day. A cloud passes over the sun, softening the light like someone laying a hand gently across your eyes. You pause, one hand still resting on the rake, and let your shoulders sag. The garden is raked. The leaves are sorted. The world, briefly, is in order. And that's exactly when someone rushes into the courtyard. Not walking. Running. You straighten instantly. The robe pulls slightly under your arms. It wasn't designed for emergencies, but it obeys. The retainer skids to a stop, breathless, sweat dotting his forehead despite the crisp autumn air. There's news, he says between gasps. From the outer province. You don't. Ask what kind. You don't need to. His eyes say everything. You nod once, already turning back toward the house. Another robe change. Of course. But this time, it's different. Because this time, it isn't your decision. There's no ritual. No reflection. No time to light incense or fold anything with care. You throw off your garden robe with a speed that makes you wince, it deserved better, and reach straight for the one hanging in the emergency alcove. The red one. It's not blood red, mind you. Not garish. Just unmistakable. A dull, rust-colored hue that says, I am no longer here to talk. This is a battle robe. Or at least, the closest thing to one without donning full armor. The fabric is reinforced at the shoulders. The sleeves are narrow and buttoned at the forearm. The obi is thick and secure. Every part of it screams mobility. Presence. Readiness. You tie it tighter than usual. Then check the knot again. You feel your posture change. Even your breathing shifts. Your eyes harden a little, not from anger, but from intent. Because this robe isn't made for comfort. It's made for consequence. You step into a hallway, the hem brushing your ankles in measured rhythm. Everyone who sees you steps back. Bows. No one asks questions. They don't need to. The robe is a signal flare. This man is going to act. Historians still argue whether samurai battle robes were symbolic or functional. Some say they were worn only in specific types of civil conflict, during non-armored skirmishes or ritualized standoffs. Others believe they were often chosen more for drama, to unsettle the enemy, to assert dominance before a weapon was even drawn. But the fringe records, the ones tucked into family journals and war poems, tell another story. That sometimes, samurai chose red to go unseen in death. Not because they expected it, but because they accepted it. There's a tale about a warrior who wore white to his final battle, believing it would honor his ancestors. His opponent wore red. Afterward, the victor stood over his fallen rival and said only, You died clean. I lived marked. You walk now across the threshold of your house, back into the courtyard, where horses are being readied. Your junior approaches, wide-eyed, already armored, but still fidgeting with the straps on his shoulder guard. He glances at your robe and swallows hard. Are you leading this? You meet his gaze. The robe answers for you. Later, perhaps tomorrow, or a month from now, you might return to the soft gray one. The simple robe. The one that smells of tea and pine smoke and quiet afternoons. But not today. Today, you are clothed in consequence. And the wind follows your sleeves like a whisper of warning. The ride is long and dust thick. You don't speak much. Neither does anyone else. Your horse's hoofs strike the road with a rhythm that matches your heartbeat, steady, clipped, absolute. Behind you, 5 riders, all younger, all armored, watch you like a shadow that might suddenly draw steel or vanish entirely. No one questions your silence. Because of the robe. Red. Bound. Tense across the shoulders. It doesn't flutter in the wind. It doesn't ask permission. It announces presence without ceremony. By the time you reach the outer village, the sun has begun its descent, casting gold across the rice paddies and the thatched roofs below. But there's no beauty in it today. Because at the village gates you find the banner of another clan. Hung too high. Hung deliberately. A message written in fabric. We're here. We don't fear you. You dismount without a word, adjusting your obi. Your sleeves don't shift. They've been tied tightly for hours. Your hands are dry, despite the tension. A minor official from the rival house steps forward, flanked by retainers dressed in dark plum robes, mourning color. But they're not mourning their own. You bow slightly. Just enough to acknowledge status. He bows deeper. Too deep. Mocking. You glance down. His robe? Perfectly tied. Too perfect. Which means this was planned. The villagers gather silently along the edges of the road. No cries. No whispers. Just fear disguised as stillness. You walk forward and stop within 3 paces of the official. Your red robe sways slightly with the movement, just enough to remind everyone that you didn't come here with a letter. You came with a decision. He gestures to a scroll. Offers it like a gift. You don't take it. Instead, you ask the one question every samurai dreads hearing. Who gave you the right? The official falters. For just a second. But it's enough. The sleeves of his robe flutter. Yours do not. Because you've dressed for confrontation. For clarity. And now comes the reckoning. You speak quietly, an accusation, a command, a promise, every word wrapped in the weight of your garment. The villagers lean in. The rival retainers shift uneasily. Your own men straighten behind you, their sleeves suddenly seeming too loose, their feet too loud. And then, without raising your voice, without drawing steel, you end the standoff. With presence. With posture. With the robe. Historians still argue whether such moments ever truly happened, where war was averted not with blades but with silk and breath. Some claim they're exaggerated tales, made grander by poets with too much ink. Others believe in the power of visual conviction. That sometimes, to wear the right robe was to become the blade itself. There's a lesser-known scroll that tells of a samurai who once stopped a riot by walking into the square in funeral white, saying only, "I am here to witness the end." The crowd dispersed. No swords drawn. Just sleeves. You leave the village at sunset. Banner lowered. No blood shed. And your red robe, now dusted with gold, hangs heavier than it did this morning. Not with sweat. With memory. You return home in the dark, and only when the house is quiet, and the rice lamps burn low, do you untie the sash and peel the robe from your shoulders. You fold it slowly. You do not hang it with the others. You return it to its chest. Because some garments aren't worn often. Only when everything depends on how you carry yourself in cloth. The chest closes with a soft thud, and you rest your palm on its lid for a long, still moment. Inside it lies not just a robe, but the silence you carried into that village. The weight of your decisions. The ripple of fabric in the minds of everyone who watched you speak with your sleeves instead of your sword. You stand up slowly, muscles stiff from the ride, but your body feels settled in a way it hasn't for days. There's nothing left to answer for tonight. No more challenges to meet. No more messages folded into hems or declarations stitched in sleeve patterns. Just the quiet. You reach for your oldest robe. The cotton one. Pale blue, faded now to soft ash. There's a tear at the collar you never bothered to mend, and the scent of wood smoke clings to it like memory. You shrug into it, and it falls around you not with ceremony, but with belonging. No one will see you in this. That's why it's your favorite. You step out onto the veranda one last time. The moon is high, soft, quiet, distant. A breeze stirs the garden trees. The wind chime tinks once, no more. You sit. Not in armor. Not in ceremony. Just in this. This robe. This night. This moment where nothing is demanded, and nothing must be signaled or performed. And it occurs to you, what a strange, exquisite thing clothing really is. How many identities have you worn today? The sleeping man. The formal witness. The one who swept leaves. The one who stood unflinching beneath a foreign banner. Each one wrapped in its own uniform. Its own skin. And yet beneath them all, it was always you. Historians rarely write about this part. The end of the day. The exhale. They focus on the armor, the battles, the silken declarations and lethal hems. But they forget what happens after the robe is hung up. What remains in the folds? You lie back. Let your robe spill around you like a sigh. The cotton tickles your neck. The futon is cool against your skin. And outside, the wind turns one last page of the night. Tomorrow, there will be more robes. More decisions. But tonight? You are dressed only for rest. And that's enough. The wind softens now. Even the breeze seems to step lighter, respectful of the hush settling over the eaves of your house. A lantern burns low somewhere beyond the corridor, its light flickering through slats of wood like distant laughter echoing from the past. And your robe, worn and warm and unremarkable, holds you the way a lullaby holds a child, completely, invisibly, without condition. You shift once. Your shoulder sighs. The fabric shifts with you. In a world where robes marked everything, rank, readiness, mourning, celebration, it's this one that matters most. The one no one else will see. The one you wear not for honor, or politics, or posture, but simply for sleep. This robe doesn't care what you did today. It doesn't care what blade you carried, what truth you defended, or what silence you spoke in place of war. It cares that you breathe slowly now. That your hands are still. That your eyes, heavy-lidded, blink one last time at the pale glow of moonlight stretching across the floor like silk pulled taut over time. You pull the quilt up to your chest. The sleeve folds gently underneath your arm. And you let yourself melt into the futon, one heartbeat at a time. Let go of the road. Let go of the robes. Let go of the titles and the thread-bound expectations. You are not the duelist. You are not the strategist. You are not the son, the sword-bearer, the solemn witness standing in a storm of silk. You are breath. And warmth. And the softness of cotton pressed between your skin and the dark. The house does not stir. The sword does not hum. There is only the hush of a robe rustling with each breath, and the slow, quiet realization that you've made it through another day. Fully dressed. And now, finally, completely at peace. Hey guys. Thank you so much for being here. Your support means a lot and I look forward to bringing you new topics soon. Stay kind, stay inspired, and I'll see you.